It's 7 o'clock in Southern California, and time for the Thursday night D-Star Roundtable for July 6th, 2017. This is Mike in 6HKH, your net control. This roundtable is held every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 0200 UTC, on XRF002A and a constellation of X reflectors, including XRF 310A, XRF 555A, and our multi-protocol X reflector XLX212 Alpha. This is a technical net dedicated to D-Star and open digital systems. It is a group effort. To join the discussion, start a topic, or ask a question, key up when I call for stations. Please remember to not quick key or tailgate. I will pause regularly to let you key up, and I ask that participating stations do the same. We do not take formal check-ins or do a roll call. It's not because we're a bunch of meanies. It's just simply to give us more time to talk D-Star. Now, Net Control is online at roundatable.tech. That's roundatable, all one word, .tech. Just enter that in the address field of your favorite browser. It will take you to the D-Star Roundtable forum board, and there you'll find a real-time chat feature called Shoutbox. You can use that to contact me as well as to post information relevant to the topic at hand, such as links and quick notes. We ask that stations offering a web address in conjunction with their presentation to post the URL or DNS in the Shoutbox so that those listening now or later on can link to that website or document location. Again, the URL is roundatable, all one word, .tech, T-E-C-H. At the close of the roundtable, tonight's Shoutbox will be moved to the Shoutbox history, which is above the general roundtable discussion category. Podcast listeners can get the Shoutbox downloaded automatically. So, we're going to start out with announcements tonight. We have a few. And first, I'd like to see if VE6DV is with us to give us some more information about the new nets that have joined the constellation of X reflectors. Jeff, are you around? VE6DV, go ahead. All right, nothing seen or heard. I thought that Jeff was going to be able to join us. Now, you may have heard the first two nets. Now, they've been going on for some time on a legacy REF reflector, but they are on Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific. They list them as 6 p.m. Mountain. It all comes out to 0000 UTC. That's Tuesday. That's the 100 watts and a wire net. And on Saturday evening, same time, 000 UTC, 8 p.m. Eastern, they have a D-Star Users Group net. So they've had one of each. And we appreciate their presence here on the constellation of X reflectors. And we appreciate if you guys could try to give them a listen and give them some check-ins. They're both check-ins nets, but they're also discussion nets. So, and they're interesting, actually. So hopefully you can give them a little bit of your time. Another announcement that came my way is to remind everybody that the German, or really Europe's, edition of an amateur radio gathering, it's known as ham radio, but it's Germany Welcomes the World is the theme. And that will be at Friedrichshafen on Friday, July 14th until Sunday, July 16th. So I know that there are many attending, actually, and there'll be quite a bit of activity in the digital media arenas. Plus, you'll hear from them on the X reflectors and other digital modes. So mark that on your calendar, and we hope to have a report from a couple of the stations that listen here and who also intended to attend, and that'll be a lot of fun. So, anyone else have an announcement for tonight's roundtable? Please key up. Alrighty, nothing heard on that front. Let's take a look at the Roundtable Forum board. We've had a fair amount of activity. On the shout box, it looks like Craig in 6MUD has reported back on his quest for an IP-based or IP power switch. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. He's got a remote power switch as a description from the 3G store, and has provided the information about it, both the pluses and the minuses. So we appreciate Craig reporting back to us. That's in the shout box. And Craig, are you around? Anything you want to add? Has anybody pummeled you over this? And have you since got it to a good working condition? N6MUD, go ahead. All right, no response from Craig. Well, that could be the reason why he posted it instead of just holding on to it to report on the air. But we appreciate his looking at it. He talked about it last Thursday, and it's one of, I guess, several choices, but there at least is someone that has purchased one, put it to use, and for those looking for them, we've had actually a number of discussions about this, especially being able to remote control your hotspot repeater to be able to reboot it, especially if you have a non-ICOM experimental repeater, MMDVM repeater, that sort of thing. They can become invaluable, especially if the hike to the mountaintop is, well, not exactly fun. We've also had a new category that's been posted in the forum boards, the roundtable. As I scroll, I can't talk tonight, apparently, but we have a new category called Open Source Digital System File Gathering and How-Tos that was kindly put together by K6KD, and even though we haven't had a lot of responses, I'm going to try, keep my fingers crossed, to see if John K6KD wanted to give us a little bit of history or the reason for adding this category. And there's 4 boards within it, all dealing with, you can see for yourself. It's on the landing page of the D-Star Roundtable Forum board. K6KD, welcome.
Okay, good evening, Mike and Annette. The first one is radio programming files, also known as code plugs, and access point files. It's a place for user-to-user to provide help. Now, we've talked about this before, but there hadn't been a lot of response because, these files are very, personalized based upon what repeaters you want to listen to, what access point frequencies, what modules you want, hopefully 002, 310, and 555. But you may have people may have a few others. So it hadn't gotten a lot of steam. So that one motivation was to put an area in, not as a library where anybody takes on the responsibility to maintain it, which is a lot of work, but a place for user-to-user help. Somebody says, I've got, I need help on a particular thing, and that this provides a way to actually, attach files. The other thing is, and more for the future, on the access point or hotspot files. Let me reset real quick. We're going to be starting to see more of the, the MMDVM, the multi-mode images, and a new feature that has come out will be particularly useful once DMR comes to the XLX reflectors, and that will lead to maybe more file sharing for various kinds of radios and files associated with the multi-mode hotspots. So this will be a place to provide that sharing. Also, as we move to open source, there are 2 other folders. One for open source fusion, specifically the YSF reflectors. And it talks about, right now in there's information on how to use an open spot to get to to connect to a YSF reflector using either a fusion or a DMR radio, and another thread in there doing the same thing from an MMDVM image. There's a folder there for open source DMR. That's TBD. Once the DMR officially comes to XLX, we'll be putting some things in there. So basically, it's a look towards the future as we go more towards the various open source digital modes. Hopefully that explains it. Back to you, Mike.
All right, John, appreciate it. I assume that these are open for users to post replies, and as in the first and third boards that they're actually looking for posts. Well, actually, for the open source DMR, that information will be forthcoming, as you said, as we move towards new business here, new features on the constellation of X reflectors. But there's quite a bit of cool information in the YSF and Fusion reflector folder, and we want stations, I understand, to take a look at this, especially if there's programming files that, aka code plugs. Some of us detest the name as well as the use, but still, there's been repeated requests for us to post them, believing them to be more current here, even though we haven't posted any before. But if you want some specific code plugs and can tell us the equipment and whatnot, we'll get it for you. And if you have it, this is a great place to post it. You can use a link. That would be the best way, especially for the larger code plugs. And, just let us know where you're going to store it. And if it's really getting a lot of use, perhaps we can store it for you. So anyway, new business on the D-Star Roundtable Forum Board. Anyone have any questions about the open source digital system, file sharing, and how to folders? They were just taken live earlier today, but for those of you that have had a chance to peruse it, any questions or comments on that? We'll take you now. Please key up. Oh, I didn't hear or see anything there. I probably should have also asked if anyone wished to talk about a remote power IP switch that they found that's something different, or in addition to what N6MUD posted. There were some that thought this was a great idea, and we're going to look into it as well. If you did that and would like to give us a report on what you found, whether it works or not, if you took it back, that'd be good information as well. We'll take you now as well. Please key up. All righty, nothing there as well. So, anybody have any follow-up to last week's discussions? We went through a number of topics, and I thought a lot of it was complete, but we always give stations an opportunity, including those who presented last Thursday or started the topic, to update the information. Sometimes you find new or better things, better references. Maybe the information was incomplete or incorrect, and you wanted to get the correct information out. As you should know by now, we do not guess or speculate here on the Thursday night D-Star Roundtable. But what we do is try to get to the facts, and, if we're not certain about it, we let everybody know. And if you're guessing, we ask that you do just that. But, we have a lot of experts and people with some experience, old salts, and they're pretty good at getting us to the nitty-gritty of the topic being discussed. But this is an opportunity to follow up on that. And also for those that listen to a recorded version, and particularly the podcast, or perhaps one of the other downloads that are available of this net, that who would like to actually add to a discussion that we started last week, this would be the time that we do that. So stations, please key up. All right, no takers on that. Now, I've heard a lot of people talking about Field Day and how it went, and even some discussions during the course of the week about efforts concerning D-Star. We've asked, I think it's been about 2 weekends ago now, but I wanted to give stations who have had the chance to, or were at, what I meant to say is if you're on field day at a participating location or you went about it on your own and you got a chance to operate D-Star or any other open digital system and wanted to tell the story of it or something even related to field day and your activities, it's always fun to hear. So stations, please key up. Well, apparently those stories were told and have since been let go during the constellation during the week. No problem. Actually, I just got a text in here that is kind of an interesting question, and that is, what exactly is an open digital system? And we've got it described as an open source digital system. We describe the roundtable as encompassing D-Star as well as open digital systems. There may be a slight difference, but I thought it might be interesting, and this one station is actually apparently was listening to the podcast. What exactly are we talking about? Now, I know we've had some discussions about this in the past, but given that someone's asked, and maybe with some time having been passed, defining open digital systems would be worthwhile. So I'll take volunteers. Who'd like to tell us what is meant by open digital systems or open source digital systems, and if there's a difference, that as well. Stations, please key up.
K6KD.
Thanks for volunteering, John. K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess it should be the first on this out of the chute on this one because that new category should have been open digital system rather than open source digital system. I'm so used to saying open source. Open source generally refers to software that is published or provided with source code, and typically under often under a particular license that says you can use it, but if you modify it, it's still you have to still provide it as open source, and it's not commercial. So that in particular refers to software. Open digital systems in general, I guess there are different definitions, but are systems that comply with open published standards. So that means that you can have a device such as an ICOM radio or a Kenwood radio that don't have a design that's published and can be freely used, but they work in conjunction with open standards. So that would probably be one way to describe the difference. Back to Ned.
All right. Well, I take it that perhaps the titling of the new category on the Roundtable Forum Board may be subject to revision. We'll have to see. Anyone else wish to tell us what they believe open digital systems encompasses and why it's an important concept? Stations, please key up.
W6KD.
And we welcome W6KD to the roundtable. Go ahead, Bob.
Good evening, Mike and Annette. Yeah, I thought I would throw out an example. For example, the DMR Mark, the DMR Motorola Amateur Radio Club that uses Motorola infrastructure, licensed proprietary Motorola backbone infrastructure like Motorola's IP Site Connect or IPSC for all the connections between their repeaters and the C bridges, which are sort of analogous to our reflectors here. And that is not an open system. That's a closed system. In fact, a closed system that's guarded by an army of lawyers. So the ability to connect yourself to the backbone is severely hampered by the fact that not only is the mechanism by which that happens obscured, but it's actually being it's behind a guarded firewall. And you contrast that with something like DXtra, which the standard is out there. Anybody that wants to write a program, for a gateway or a reflector, software for a reflector that uses the protocol can do that. You don't have to reverse engineer anybody else's work, potentially with legal consequences, depending on how you came across the software and all that. So that's really the difference, open standard or an open standard system. You don't necessarily have the source code, but you have the roadmap. You have the details on how the interface is supposed to work, and so third-party developers can sit down and write software and make the stuff interoperate properly, and that's really the difference. Probably the starkest example or counter-example to an open system is the DMR Mark, in the last year or so, alternatives to that have been popping up over on that side of the digital world. But one of the things that really has allowed DStar to lead the way, really, in the open standards arena is in fact, right now, I'm going to digress for a second, but Yaesu Fusion, the Wires X reset. Anyway, the Yaesu Wires X system is another one that the protocol is not published. To get into it, you have to buy a piece of Yaesu hardware and register it with them, and that's the only pathway in, as opposed to homebrew software and hardware, etc. So I guess I've belabored the point enough. But that's sort of some examples of the differences.
All right, appreciate it. So stations, please key up. All right, nothing seen or heard. So we've differentiated open source digital systems, which refers to the software, and that's, I guess, part of it. But really, the key is to embrace open digital systems, some of which, as Bob just explained, were essentially closed as proprietary and not lending to experimentation, to developing software to use it elsewhere. And with the advent of open digital system reflectors and other means of being able to communicate with other digital modes other digital modes than DStar, such as DMR and Yaesu Fusion, has changed things. And where before some of them were open, we would throw cabbages at it and not discuss it, and really shunned any discussion of those modes and their radios. But now, especially given that these systems are now available to all, and you don't have to. Bob and John already explained this. I don't need to go over it again, but it's also important to note, I think, that as the quality, for example, of DMR radios goes up and the price goes down, and the rapidly increasing and variable, or variety, I should say, of of hotspots or really access points, such as the OpenSpot, and there are others, and there are more coming through the line. That it is important to understand that it's not just D-Star alone. Now, of course, these other modes cannot open or otherwise exist on their own. At some point, we're going to want to be able to communicate with them. I know they badly want to be able to talk to D-Star, and that is coming. So, any further comments on this? If you've got an opposing viewpoint or you think we're out of our minds, please let us know. But don't be quite so blunt. Stations, please key up.
N6MUD.
N6MUD, Craig, we were bad-mouthing you just a little bit ago. Well, not really. We appreciate your shout box posts. N6MUD, go ahead.
Hey, good evening, Mike and Annette. Sorry I was late to that here. Going out to dinner with my wife, and I kind of ran late. But I do have a question for you guys. In my mind, open source or open digital technology is something else that goes along with that. Is there's no central registration type of a system like you do on D-Star. And I'm not a DMR guy, but I believe everyone has to register for some type of DMR ID or something in order for your DMR radio to work. So I'm kind of curious if my definition of not having a central server or a central repository for registration, is that a good definition for an open digital system, or am I kind of off there, Mike? Over.
That's a great question, Craig. Who'd like to provide an answer? Stations, please key up.
K W6KD.
I have K6KD and W6KD. First, back to John. K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, since Bob is following me, I can be sloppy and he'll just clean it up. It's not completely clear cut. The way I look at it, it depends upon what is used with the registration. I think of the registering with the on D-Star with the legacy systems with the U.S. Trust as a method of controlling. And the same thing when the DMR was registered for the DMR mark, it was used for control purposes also, and I wouldn't characterize either of those systems as open source. When DMR opened up for open systems, there's a need for a unique ID, and just the nature of how the system operates and to provide some order. So the people that started the open source went to the DMR mark and asked if they would be willing to allow their ID to be used for things such as CCS7, as well as just DMR purposes that didn't necessarily involve their network. So they already had the infrastructure set up and they agreed to do it. So that's why it's being used. But they haven't, as of now, tried to use their facilities for registration in any kind of controlling way. So I think it's fair to say that these systems are still open, even though we're using the facilities of DMR Mark, which originally used it as a as part of a closed system. If that makes sense. So back to you, Mike.
It does. W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, it's really in the execution. For example, in D-Star, the trust server is used as an authenticator. and so it is so the registration is being used, as John says, a control mechanism to control ultimately who's allowed to transmit through the system and who's not. You can have a benevolent dictator that uses a system like that to make sure that non-hams or whatever aren't going through, but the system really doesn't do that. Or you can use it in a more nefarious way, and I don't know that it has been used that way. But if somebody were to desire to, they could blacklist people for whatever reason. Whether that reason was legal or not, or good or not, is a whole separate debate. But that's one side of it, and then the back side of it is how that registration is done, and whether or not whether or not you are essentially being authenticated, at the gateway when you register, and there again, if it's done improperly, if it's done openly, such that if you get a call sign, you get a DMR ID, which, as far as I know, is how it's done. I've not heard of anybody being denied a DMR registration if they had a valid call sign. Then that's okay. If they say, oh, you're a DMR guy, or you're whatever, they decide that no, for whatever reason we've decided you're not going to be registered in our system, then control is being executed there as well. So, and as John said, the technical requirements of DMR require a numerical ID. You can't put a call sign into the stream. The radios use a numerical ID. Your DMR ID is just that. So the servers serve a necessary purpose in constructing the mapping between your call sign and a uniquely assigned numerical ID, and it has to be maintained somewhere, or chaos would ensue. And so it's kind of a necessary. It's a necessary thing, and it has the potential to be a problem. But so far, I think it's been done pretty much above board. So it's something you got to keep our eyes on. Thank you, Net W6K.
All right. Any other comments concerning the use of registration and IDs as being separators from open and closed digital system stations? Please key up.
N6M.
N6MUD, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a DMR guy, but there in itself lies what I feel is a fundamental flaw in DMR, is that you try to take a commercial protocol, a commercial standard, and apply it to amateur radio. And sure, it's working now, meaning that there is one centralized authority that basically could be used as a gatekeeper in the future. The unique ID didn't necessarily have to be that way. I mean, there could be other ways to do a unique identifier. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that some authoritative figure or server hands out. So it could be done in various ways. It could be done by IP address. It could be done. There's lots of ways to do it. It could be done call sign. Call sign works fine on the X reflector world. Why wouldn't it work fine on the DMR world? So anyway, I understand it. I just don't really like it, and I agree that everyone should keep an eye on that, because it still means that there is someone out there who could drop the hammer at any point in time and all of a sudden shut down DMR if they wanted to. So it's just my 2 cents. Back to you, Mike.
All right, Craig. Well, appreciate that. Keep in mind that as far as D-Star is concerned, your call sign, which you must enter in your radio in the My Call field, is something that you obtained obviously independent of D Plus and the U.S. Trust. But it is that call sign that is used to do a mandatory registration. There's no question but that is control. Now, with DMR, because the equipment can't use your call sign, although I suppose there may be a workaround, but the thought was initially to use a 7-digit ID, which all the radios in their consumer programming software have 7 digits to put in there to differentiate your radio from the guy next door. And it being commercial, no thought was given at the time to using a call sign. And initially, DMR Mark, which is really all there was, used it as control. Since then, that DMR ID has been put to all kinds of uses, and none of which, except for DMR Mark, is a control factor. At least I'm not aware of that. Now, I'll stand subject to correction, but we need to be wary. And of course, what Craig says is that I guess somebody could just go berserk and wipe out the DMR ID database, but I don't know that that would affect anyone outside of DMR Mark, and given the proliferation of call signs, much like a QRZ of DMR, I suppose, or an FCC registry of call signs. Who's assigned what 7-digit ID could be easily recreated outside of the loss of the database. But the loss of privileges would not go away, because there really isn't a privilege except for in DMR Mark. But just like being on D+, you have to agree to and take what you get. So with that being said, further comments? Stations, please key up.
K6KD.
K6KD, go ahead.
Well, Mike, I don't think the IP address would be a feasible thing, because they change, fairly often, and the IP address you have today, someone else may have tomorrow. Now, while it would be possible to use some sort of algorithm to take a call sign and create a 7-digit ID, the problem with doing that is there are a lot of people out there that are currently using DMR and have 7-digit IDs, who are using DMR Mark, who have been and are using Brandmeister, and you would have to make sure that the 7-digit number that was created by your call sign to 7-digit algorithm didn't interfere with any of the already assigned IDs. So it wouldn't really be feasible. So I guess I would, my opinion of Craig is that this is something that is most practical. I'm as anti-closed source as anybody, but I think this is one thing that is just, is just the practical way of going. Back to Nat.
W6.
Thanks, John. W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, to expand it a little further too, is that if you're talking radio to radio, or if you're talking through a private open source repeater or a gateway or reflector system, such as those that are starting to appear, the XLX reflectors will be very soon will be hybrid DMR D-Star devices, or potentially hybrid, depending on how the SysOp decides to set it up. But there's nothing that would prevent users on a particular system from coming up with their own scheme for DMR IDs. It's not really, it wouldn't be a really good idea, I don't think, because the way things are being done now is that there's metadata that's embedded in the D-Star stream. For example, your call sign, your low-speed text message line, etc. None of that stuff exists in DMR. So, in order for you to get your call sign into onto dashboards and And in places where it's trivially easy to do in D-Star, that has to come from somewhere else. It can't come from the radio because the established protocol for DMR doesn't support it. There's no place in the stream to put that data. So what happens, instead of getting the call sign that eventually shows up on the dashboard from the radios, from the stream coming right out of the radio, which is how we do it here in D-Star, you're going to get the DMR ID, do a database lookup, and then put that on the dashboard. And so your gateway, your reflector, they're going to be doing some of that work by consulting offline databases to make that happen. And so that's kind of that's where the need for a unique registered mapping between your call sign and that numerical DMR ID comes in. Is it allows those databases to be built in different places and used to do things that we take for granted in D-Star. So it's not a requirement, and you could certainly, like I said, let me reset real quick. You know, if you're on a private system, you can make up your own DMR ID. You know, really, to be honest, you know, the gateway software is not checking it, or at least most of it isn't. The radio doesn't care. So, you know, we use it as a matter of convention so that other parts of our infrastructure will do what they're supposed to. But, you know, the very first day that we hear that the DMR registrar has refused to give somebody a DMR ID for some arbitrary reason other than, like, you don't have a call sign, that would be a legitimate reason. But, you know, we don't like the way you look, or, you know, your call sign is the initials of the devil, or, you know, whatever. You know, and the first time we hear that somebody is not issued a DMR ID for some reason, you know, for some, you know, just arbitrary reason, then I think that will be the day before a new DMR ID registration system comes up, and you know, and that wouldn't be good, but it was certainly possible. You know, just as the X reflector directory that John maintains is a X reflector directory, and somebody else could set up their own tomorrow. The same thing. The DMR database, DMR to call sign database, is a DMR call sign database, not the database. And if for whatever reason we decided we needed something different, we could build it tomorrow and start using it. So, you know, it's all done through mutual cooperation and, you know, some understanding that, you know, we don't have to play if we don't want to. Back to the net, W6K.
Thank you, Bob. Stations, please key up.
K6KD.
K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, you know, the XLX reflectors are certainly open source. And, you know, DMR comes to that, it will be, you know, an open source type of DMR reflector. It does currently require authentication with the database. The XLX won't allow DMR traffic without an authenticated DMR ID. And one reason for that is to provide the call sign, you know, because, you know, when we do it gets into a different topic, transcoding, we're going to want when something starts in DMR and ends up on D-Star, we're going to want the call sign in the low-speed data to look just like it did had it come from D-Star. Now, that doesn't mean that since it's open source, if you didn't, you know, someone didn't like the way it did that, they could go in the code and modify it and take out that authentication. But that's the way the data works, and I'm pretty sure that's the way it will work if you use if you don't modify the code. Back to that.
All right, John, thanks. Well, as DMR has expanded in its various iterations, moving from DMR Mark to Brandmeister, and then, of course, we've got the open source systems that support DMR now. It's been the protocol, and I haven't seen anybody complain about the DMR ID. Now, are you going to find posts in the Yahoo groups about people who don't like that? Sure. But even, the movers and shakers in software, such as with MMDVM, and things that allow DMR to operate on openly available or buildable hotspots or access points. I'm not aware of anyone saying that we need to jettison the 7-digit ID. It serves a purpose, and so far has not been used to create trouble. And as Bob pointed out, the moment that happened, you'd see a whole new ID system implemented to the extent that it can be used in the existing equipment. And then, Craig is correct that this is commercial gear being put to use in the amateur radio arena. But that is nothing new to amateur radio. It's just non-traditional amateur radio. So anyway, further comments concerning, what perhaps constitutes an open digital system, what doesn't, and any objections or concerns. We'll take you now. Please key up. I have WA6PX and W6KD. First, we say hello to Jim, WA6PX. Welcome to the roundtable. Go ahead.
Roger, I was just going to point out these kind of issues exist in all kinds of marketplaces. For example, the Apple system is considered a closed ecosystem, whereas Android is not. Your cable
We're waiting for WA6PX to unkey. We lost the signal. Stand by.
Yeah, WA6PX. Sorry about the signal problem.
Well, you were going great guns, and then your audio just dropped. Where you left off was your cable, and then you got clipped, and I'm not sure why, but if you could pick it up from there, we'd appreciate it. WA6PX, go ahead.
Roger, I was just pointing out that every cable TV system has to have a MAC address on each device. And every internet, you have the domain name service hierarchy and so on. So there's always going to have to be these kind of requirements.
Well said, appreciate it. W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the topic of pressing shoehorning ham radio into a commercial system that wasn't designed for it. That's been one of my talking points for a long time about what I like about D-Stars, that it was designed by hams for hams, and it does what it does fairly well. Just the fact that things like call sign, the call signs designed in, and the routing abilities and stuff that we have, routing and linking abilities. we kind of take it for granted. But the flip side of it, though, is and something which is becoming compelling, really compelling, is that the is even though we are having to kind of jump through hoops and bend over backwards and go to some length to fabricate a mechanism to make these the commercial radios work in the ham radio service. The fact that they are so ubiquitous, they're everywhere. They're being used by plumbers and delivery companies and realtors and who knows who else. The thing, what that drives is the ability to go on Amazon.com and find a fully digital radio that we can use in this for this purpose at the sub $100 price point. And so it's great to have a ham centric radio that was designed for and by hams, but you're going to pay 4 times as much or 5 times as much or more for the radio. So there is something to be said for taking something off the shelf where you get the benefits of mass pricing, and if you can make it work, then it's going to be very appealing. In fact, compellingly appealing to a large number of people when they look at the $600 price tag on a Kenwood D74 next to a Hytera MD380 at Amazon for $85. So there's that. Anyway, back to that W6 Kitty.
Thank you, Bob and Jim. Anyone else, please key up now.
K8SR.
K8SRB, thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mike. That was by accident. K8SRB.
No problem, and you did just exactly what we would want you to do if you do an inadvertent key up, drop the mic, the dog grabs it and runs with your radio, keying it up. It happens to all of us. Just let me know, and I'll take you off the list, and we'll be happy to move on. Stations, please key up. All right, nothing seen or heard. So as we continue to take this path that is D-Star is running along with us, but we're not talking about D-Star directly. That there's going to be a point, I suppose, that where the two are going to meet. So we're gathering open source digital system. Now, I did it too. Doggone it, John, I'm going to have to think about this again. So it's open digital systems, which includes D-Star. It's just that as discussion goes, adding DMR and Fusion to the mix of open digital systems, including D-Star, may seem stark and new to some, but it really isn't. And as we move along that path, again, reminding everyone that we're not going to allow any closed system of whatever nature to be part of this. That just doesn't serve our purpose and is actually counterproductive. But the question becomes, well, wait a minute. How are you going to go about doing this? Now, there's been a lot of terms that have been kicked around on here and actually on other systems and repeaters that have heard us talk about it, and those terms include transcoding, translation, conversion, and it's probably an appropriate time. John K6KD mentioned transcoding without authorization, so perhaps this would be a good time to define transcoding because it isn't quite what it seems, and unfortunately, it's not being used as I hear stations talk about it in the proper context. That is, the meaning apparently is not clear, and so I thought it'd be fun to talk about some definitions in addition to what we've defined thus far, to also include the word transcoding and see if we can clear that up for those that may be unclear about what that means and if that's the appropriate word to use. So, as before, I take volunteers first. Who wants to start this one out for us? Please, Kia.
K6KD.
Well, John, you've been throwing your hand up first, and I appreciate it. K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, since I did use the term before without authorization, I probably should give a definition. Let me start out by saying that when we talk, our voice can be represented as a analog waveform. Now, when we're using digital systems, obviously that analog waveform has to be converted to a digital representation, and there are different ways of doing it. It turns out that D-Star has one way to do it, and the various D-Star protocols, the D+, D extra, and DCS, all use the same way of converting. No, I'm not. Well, no, I didn't want to use that term. Of using a digital signal representation, but they're packaged differently. And we talked one way to describe going from one packaging of D-Star to another is converting. On the other hand, DMR and Fusion both use a different method of converting. They use we can say they use a different codec. And similarly, going from DMR to Fusion, you could say that's converting because they use the same codec, but they package it differently. So the process, though, of going from, let me get away from that phone. Let me reset real quick. Okay, the process of going from a coding for any of the D-Star protocols to DMR or Fusion is a process of changing the digital representation from one method to a different method, from one or we can say from one codec to a different codec. So that process is transcoding. In other words, the process transcoding is a means of going from D-Star to DMR or Fusion or back, going between those two. Back to net.
All right, thank you, John. Stations, please key up. We're talking about transcoding. Do we have it right, and what does it mean? Please key up now.
ZL1YHF.
ZL1YHF. Appreciate you being with us. Go ahead.
Hi. So I was trying to get in on one of the last questions, but it ties into this. One thing that I had read, and it kind of goes to the heart of open digital systems generally, and when you look at something like D-Star, it's kind of interesting because the system itself and its underlying architecture is open, but then it does use a proprietary codec. So when you're talking about the transcoding, it's kind of interesting because you have this issue with, well, you have to buy a proprietary chip in order to do the AMBE, and there's already some other people I think doing Freestar and maybe some other systems that don't use a proprietary codec but still use the same underlying D-Star. And so I think that that presents an interesting issue because in some places, for example, France, from what I understand, D-Star is banned, not because of D-Star itself, but because of the reliance on the ANBE, and it goes, I guess the regulators there have determined it to be against sort of the public interest requirements and, maybe an encryption scheme, which is a different conclusion than what the U.S. and, of course, most of the rest of the world arrived at, but it does present some challenges. So if I've said anything wrong, I appreciate you correcting me, but I just wanted to highlight some of those points. Over.
Well, I got you, and I appreciate you getting in. We didn't see you before, but you make an important point. Stations, please key up.
W6KD.
W6KD, go ahead.
Yeah, this actually was a big deal back in the early days of D-Star. It was heavily lampooned by some, because it was because of the proprietary nature of things. But the practicality of it is this: is that you have you have to have a codec of some kind or another. You have to have the ability to take a PCM waveform and compress it sufficiently to get it suitably packaged in a 4.8 kilobaud data stream, which can be sent out over GMSK, which is what D-Star does. And one way or another, even if you have your own open source algorithm and software or firmware to do that, the reality is that the hardware that you're going to have to put it on to make it work isn't going to be any cheaper than just buying the $25 chip from DVSI. So it really is kind of a red herring. It ultimately, I think, was that line of resistance kind of died off along the way because even if you're going to do it with some open source piece of software, out of principle or whatever, you're going to have to, you're probably going to have to lay out more money for a suitable chip. I mean, if you dig into what's in one of these DVSI AMBI vocoder chips, it's a pretty sophisticated little package, and it's not like they're holding us at gunpoint. And extorting, hundreds of dollars, $25 per chip in lots of 100 or whatever. It's a pretty reasonable price for what you're getting. And if you're going to do it some alternative way, they're going to spend at least as much money, bottom line. And even if you can do it cheaper, it's not going to be much cheaper. And so really, is it a stumbling block? And I suggest that it is not. And by the way, all the DMR and all the Yaesu Fusion radios use a next generation variant of the same series of AMBI chips. So D-Star uses the original AMBI 2000. The DMR and the Fusion use the AMBI 2020 actually reset. They use the AMBI Plus protocol, and anyway, and nobody's really. I've never heard anybody complain about it on Fusion or DMR either. So yeah, I think that ship has long since sailed. If they were charging us $300 a chip or something to be able to use it, that'd be one thing, but they're not. And the part about D-Star being illegal in France, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, that may have been true early on. I'm pretty confident that I've seen Foxtrot stations on some of the reflectors out there. So, maybe it was originally illegal or not approved for use, and later was. In fact, I think we have a member of the group here that was traveling in France using D-Star as well recently. So I'm not sure that's true. So anyway, back to that, the research caddy.
All right, appreciate it, Bob. It's an interesting question. Of course, open system doesn't mean it's free, but when you buy the DVSI chip, you're free to use it as you like. I mean, within the law, of course. All of this is confined by that, but it's not like you're being told just exactly how and when you're to put that chip to use. So it's just part of the openness of the system. It's just nothing's free. So at least that's my take on it. Stations, please key up.
ZL1.
ZL1YHF. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I mean, I definitely agree with the, the last sentiment that, from a financial perspective, it's not really an issue. At least in the world right now where we have, basically this one codec. I think it becomes a problem when we're talking about things like transcoding, however, that, for example, could be completely done in software on a PC without having to have, additional hardware. And if every single digital mode that we wanted, required a different sort of codec or a different proprietary hardware chip, then that, quickly becomes either expensive or untenable, and certainly not optimal because, easily with, microcontrollers these days, in which case you can buy a Raspberry Pi for $35 that has, multi-core, multi-gigahertz processing. You could easily, put these codecs on different chips. But then the other thing is that, there's no way to necessarily get better. We can't look and examine the internals of what's going on and say, okay, well, maybe with additional computer power or something else, we can actually shrink that, using a different or a better codec, we can actually shrink the amount of bandwidth that's required. And I think that, that sort of experimentation and it kind of gets to the core of what, amateur radio is. So I do feel that's a bit of a missed opportunity, though. I mean, again, I support competition, and there's people that are already doing that with, like I said, Freestar. And, I'm not sure, as far as the situation in France, I don't know. All the information I can find does, in fact, date back to 2010, but I also haven't found anything that said that the French regulatory agency has issued a different opinion. So, I don't know, but it does get to an issue that if somebody keeps the details about, actually how to, code and decode these, communication streams, when does that cross the line into encryption and things like that? If it's not, and is the next generation system that are the people that create these, codec chips going to be, as benevolent and just charge $20, or are they going to try to extort? So anyway, I think there's a few risks there that I wanted to highlight. Over.
I'm glad you did. And I suppose this would be a good time. Well, first of all, let me see if there are any comments to Matt's concern about the codec chips that, let's just say that the manufacturer, the patent holders, go berserk and decide, I'm going to pull the plug and I want to make $1 million right now, and suddenly they issue a new generation that's 300 times the price of them today. Is that going to complicate things? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Please key up.
K6KD.
K6KD, go ahead.
Well, a couple of points. There are several XLX X-reflectors or XLX reflectors in France. And if you look at the directory I maintain, xrefl.net, and just search the page for France, there's I think about 4 of them. Now, that doesn't mean that those are linked to over-the-air repeaters. That could be a different situation. As far as the potential runaway price for the chips, well, first of all, that would impact, that would impact or could impact DMR radios, fusion radios, radios used by all different commercial venues. Keep in mind that the design of the DVSI chip is proprietary. It is meeting an open standard, so that doesn't prevent someone else from developing it. It just turns out that the other solutions haven't been as good. Just like a radio, you can buy a AM/FM radio, and the standard for the AM and FM signal is well established. But that doesn't, you can't, each radio is got a proprietary design, and there's no one that would prevent some other company from producing a chip that does the same thing but differently without using their proprietary design. And I suspect if they started increasing the price, then there would be an incentive for another company to produce an alternative and compete with them. That's just the marketplace. Back to that.
All right, John, appreciate it. Well, let's take transcoding a bit further. Z01YHF mentioned that he believed it would be, software driven, that there would be a server that would take care of this, and also mentioned All-Star. And perhaps it is, this would be a good time to describe how transcoding, if we're going to use that phrase, is going to be employed. Because it's not like anything presently in use, and it's not like anything that's attempted to be able to cross the big divide, such that, as has been described thus far, allowing DMR radios to be transcoded to D-Star and D-Star transcoded to Fusion and whatever. And in doing so, there's no degradation in signal, and you wouldn't know. We'd like to take a stab at where we're going to be going with this, and that is, how do you believe this is going to be accomplished? And it's kind of a baited question, because there are stations that are working on this right now, a couple of which are frankly within the, so-called Kings of Digital system that we call the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable. But still, it's not there yet, but what's being worked on, though, is known. So who'd like to take a stab? Stations, please key up.
K6KD.
K6KD. Stab away.
Okay, well, I just wanted to sort of clarify one thing. There are current applications out there that attempt to do this. And the reason I say attempt to do this is, I think the quality is, some of them are an all-software solution, using software algorithms. I guess that's kind of redundant. I'd say that the quality, in my opinion, from D-Star to DMR, I'd give it a C, and from DMR to D-Star, I'd give it an F. Maybe F plus, you can make it out, but it's pretty bad. What's being done is to implement DMR in a future XLX reflector that will enable the reflector to continue to be used as D-Star just as they are today, be used as a DMR reflector, or be able to designate the capability of transcoding. And the way it'll work is, without getting into the details of how the server and transcoding will work, is that D-Star will connect up to directly to an XLX reflector, or to another reflector that's linked to an XLX reflector, just as it would normally for D-Star. That XLX reflector module will also be associated with a talk group and a DMR radio would connect up to that talk group, just the same way they connect up to other talk groups, and it would be as if the transcoding occurs within the XLX reflector and an associated separate server, to make to be able to transcode between D-Star and DMR. So everybody will be able to talk, and what we're planning is for there to be no discernible degradation at all in quality in either direction. And that's what's new, vacuuming.
All righty. Well, let's take. I'm not sure that I'm clear on this. So, is this a software-only solution? Is it a software and hardware solution? And why or how can you be so bold as to say that the conversion between codecs will be crystal clear and not even detectable unless you're watching, the call sign history and the station's information, that is the data. K6KD, I'll hand it back to you first.
Okay, well, the particular solution we're talking about is a software-hardware solution, and the hardware consists of DVSI chips, and possibly it may be possible for the ThumbDV to be used in that way because the ThumbDV uses DVSI chips. So it's hardware, software. And the reason I can be so bold is because we're currently using it in beta, and W6KD and I have used it. I've used it extensively in conversations with stations in Luxembourg and Germany. D-Star to DMR, D-Star to D-Star, DMR to DMR, and the quality is outstanding. You wouldn't know there's any transcoding, and that is very different from what other people are doing. Other people have been different kinds of solutions, but the quality is such that you wouldn't want it to be on the net. This is different. Back to net.
Well, in the use that you and Bob have put it to test, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's just testing. I mean, it's not something that stations can implement on their own or, go out and sign up for now. Do I have that right? K6KD, go ahead.
It's just being implemented in beta right now. It's not it's not available yet. So that's why we say upcoming. But it works. Back to you.
WA6.
Alrighty, got it. WA6PX, go ahead.
Roger, I'm just wondering if you could contrast this approach with the one that the Papa system is using on X Reflector 12 Alpha.
Oh, I think we can do that. So I'll ask K6KD, do you want to do that? If not, that's fine. I'll call for stations, but K6KD, go ahead.
Well, I don't know what they're doing. I don't, I haven't listened. I haven't listened to that. But I'll just say that if someone is doing it using a Brandmeister talk group bridged to an XLX reflector the way it's currently being done by a lot of people right now, then I'd say the quality from D-Star to DMR, I said it was a C. I guess that's, you could debate that. I'd say it's just okay. But the quality from DMR to D-Star is absolutely terrible. Now, I don't know. That is generally, the experience from, between Brandmeister and XLX. I don't want to comment. I don't know what any particular group is doing. Back to that.
Okay, appreciate it. Well, I'll comment on it. The Papa system has a combination of a All-Star bridge as well as a X reflector, and they publicly announced that they'll take key-ups from DMR on the X reflector, but they don't want any stations talking because the audio is so poor. And they also use the bridge to bring analog into D-Star, which is beyond me. But the system that they use, however it's described, is not very good. And there's a way of defining and separating out ways of translating or converting digital signals. I understand that converting probably isn't the correct word. Converting would be appropriate within the digital mode, but it's hard to apply transcoding to even existing systems because, number one, they're not using the technology that's currently in beta testing. Number two, the audio is terrible, and that's been kind. And number three, that it is such that you could almost describe it as being 4K transcoding if you're struggling for a way to separate the systems out. So we have, when I say we, the roundtable and the technical support group have looked at a number of ways of trying to accommodate the interest in DMR, especially that is the open systems, and giving them what they want, which is access to D-Star. I know that there are a lot of people on D-Star that may not want everyone else to have access to it, but the reality is that people are buying up DMR radios, they're buying up multi-mode hotspots, and at present they're using them to connect to D-Star. But now, natively, you're going to be able to connect to a reflector if you're on DMR to a talk group, and D-Star radios connected to the reflector on the same reflector, but on the other side, so to speak, will be able to talk to DMR and DMR back to D-Star, and you won't know the difference. In fact, you may even have to ask what kind of radio you're using. That's the system we're talking about. So I'll take further comments on that question, comparing and contrasting stations. Please key up.
K6K.
K6KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, Mike, you mentioned 4K transcoding. I thought I might just elaborate on that a little bit. And part of it is it's a catchy term because the latest TV standard is 4K, better than HD. The rationale in describing the approach we're talking about is that it does a faithful, accurate transcoding of a 4.8 K baud signal. So 4800 baud signal is being accurately transcoded. So some of us are using the term 4K transcoding, and to differentiate between some of the other systems out there. The only other thing is we have a lot of experimental reflectors of various types that we do all kinds of crazy things with. We've done things like create audio loops and see if the reflectors can handle it. Do kinds of things that can be disruptive. But I think our philosophy is that on these constellation reflectors that most people use, we want to have a good solid baseline so we can talk about experimentation, but we don't want to drag people through the through the pain of having to put up with experimentation when they're really trying to communicate. So that's one of the reasons why I think we've been very reluctant. It would have been very straightforward for us to do what other people are doing and plug in DMR onto the net and have lousy quality. But I think we wanted to not only wait until the systems were open, but wait until it was done right. Being able to check in and with a lousy quality and say, I've done it. That's fine for some people, but that is, I just think, speaking for all of us, that's just not the way we want to do it. Back to Ned.
All right, John, thanks. Well, I think it's fair to say that in evaluating the approach to true digital crystal clear transcoding, that is that other modes are heard much like you hear us now on D-Star, it's having to not let it infringe on or degrade D-Star. I mean, that's one of the things that many of the participating stations, the users, the listeners to this roundtable, when we've talked about this idea, and this was actually before even some of the new software and hardware technology became available, was, look, we don't need we don't want to make it a special big to-do in order to have non-D-Star digital modes participating with us, let's say, on this net or on the constellation. That is that we don't have to, do anything special to make things different. That it's automatic. The D-Star operates just as before, and you're not going to be on the constellation on D-Star doing anything different than you're doing now. The only difference is that people with DMR radios will be able to participate in the constellation as if they had D-Star radios in their hands. But obviously that's not what's happening. And that while the connection process for DMR radio may be different than what they're used to, it's certainly not going to change the way of operating for D-Star. And that was a very key concept. And I kind of like the 4K transcoding because there are others that are working on this, that have talked and written about various ways to go about it, and none of them come close to the approach that K6KD has described, and which basically, makes it effortless from the user standpoint, which to me was very important. No excuses. We don't have to, play a special tone when a non-D-Star radio comes on. Now, there's some effect that this is going to have, and that's pretty much going to put DMR repeaters, making them less useful. It's because now DMR, you connect directly to a talk group that's associated with a reflector. That's it. You don't have to have a repeater. You don't need a repeater. You need an access point or hotspot, but same thing for D-Star. So with that being said, let's see if that stirred anybody up or got them dancing in their chairs. We'll take your viewpoint. Stations, please key up.
N6MU.
N6MUD, go ahead.
Hey guys, I just have a quick question regarding this technology, this transcoding technology, 4K transcoding technology. Once it's tested and becomes available, is this something that's going to be for sale? Meaning, will Papa System and various other link repeater systems out there go ahead and buy this technology and implement it themselves? Or is it going to be proprietary, build your own type of technology, not for sale? I'm just kind of curious there, Mike. Over.
All right. Well, I've talked a bit. Anybody else wish to answer that on behalf of the Kings of Digital? Please key up.
K6.
K6KD, go ahead.
Well, it'll be available as, the software part of it will be open source, and the hardware can be purchased from DVSI and possibly with a thumb DV with Northwest Digital, but it'll require a separate server, access to it. And so I mean, it's not going to be something that that only a few people can have. I suspect with the cost, it in the beginning when it rolls out, it probably won't be generally available, but it'll be such that if you have a server that a 4K transcoding server with the capacity, it's possible that like say you have a transcoding server that could handle 12 channels. So it's possible you could make one of the channels available to to another group. It's it's very flexible. Anyway, back to Ned.
All right, thanks, John. And I'm not as involved in this as John and Bob are John and Bob, but this is not secret stuff. It's not proprietary. It's not patented, or I mean, to the extent of the DVSI chip that's part of the hardware, it can be implemented, but it's not. This is pretty rugged stuff. In the sense that, and that's rugged's not a good viewpoint, but no, it's not. Anybody else. There's nothing that prevents others from implementing it, and over time, I suspect that that will happen. But the important part of this for the roundtable and the constellation of X reflectors is that we've been working on and with the developers, which this is software is open source. It's not out there yet, and we've been testing right along with the developers and utilizing the hardware as it's become available, which is frankly quite expensive. And don't apply anything into that. It's just that's what it is. And at some point, systems that have interest in this will eventually put it up as well. But I have to tell you, it's unbelievable. And in our survey of systems, no one else has this. Not that we want to be the sole proprietors of it. And over time, we certainly won't. But we're going to be one of the early, if not the earliest, implementers, at least in North America, and this is how we are. And we skipped over all the, the stops along the way that are unsatisfactory, which sound bad, for which excuses have to be made, and for which users, can't stand what they're hearing, or they're told you can participate, but you can't say anything, or, there's constant objections and dissatisfaction with how it works. Well, that's fine. Systems can do that, not us. All right. Anyone else have comments? Stations, please key up.
WA6P.
WA6PX, go ahead.
Roger. Just a factoid. Northwest Digital has been mentioned several times. So I thought I'd point out that I'm coming to you via the repeater NW7DR.
Okay, well, I think we mentioned Thumb DV once or twice because it has a DVSI chip on it. I missed any other references to it, so I'm not sure what your point is, Matt. Maybe you dropped and I didn't get the rest of your transmission. I'm sorry, Jim. I didn't get the rest of your transmission. WA6PX, go ahead.
Roger, I'm using the NW7DR repeater in Edmonds to participate tonight.
Well, we're glad you're on with us, and it's a good sounding repeater, and we appreciate you being with us. I have put you in the log as a new participant, and we thank you for being with us tonight. Any further comments, questions? You don't have to, carry on about what the things we've talked about, but we can certainly take questions or comments. If you're scratching your head and you don't think that things are clear, or if you'd like to keep and say, who cares, move on, we'll take that as well, but we don't want to leave anybody in the dust. So stations, please key up. Well, nothing seen or heard. The future certainly is going to be exciting, and we invite everybody to ride along with us and give a listen, and certainly see what you think as this gets implemented, which, it shouldn't be too far away, but we're certainly not going to put it online until we know that it works just fine. Now, I've been getting a number of requests for stations to talk about some new D-Star gear they may have purchased. I'm not exactly sure what that may be. I mean, the D74 has been out for a while from Kenwood. The two new ICOM radios are up and running, so I suspect that this question that was forwarded to me has mostly to do with access points, that is hotspots, because there are a number of variations and new versions that were presented or even put into they were sold for that matter, not just vaporware, or soon to be in production from Dayton. So if you have something new that operates on D-Star and would like to share it with everyone else, well, that's what it seems that we should be doing. And I don't disagree. Stations, please key up. Well, nothing seen or heard, so I suspect that either it's the same old stuff or there's nothing terribly new to talk about. All right, well, let's do this. Let's take a break and move into our open question, open topic period. Usually we try to do that around 9 Pacific time, but it's a half hour early isn't too bad. This is when we open it up for questions that you may have concerning anything related to D-Star or Open Digital Systems. It could be about what we've talked about tonight. It could be on matters that you've had problems with and have either been dying to bring it to a net like this, or you posed your question to another net and were told to come over here, and then you can get an answer and take it back. That's fine. Also, if there's a topic that you'd like to have discussed, we can certainly entertain that. We might start it tonight, or we may have to put it off, but it's what's on your mind, or questions, issues that you may have of anything that's related to tonight or not. Just, of course, it has to be related to D-Star or Open Digital Systems. So, stations, please key up.
K6, KD.
K6, KD, go ahead.
Okay, well, I kind of think I'm exceeding my key-up limits for the next month, but I don't know if this is something to talk about. We did talk about it a few weeks ago, and Bob and I happened to be talking about it, mentioning it just in passing on another, on a different area, and there was some interest in it, and so I thought maybe just to bring it up to see if there's much interest in it. And that was the adapter to enable the OpenSpot to be used mobilely, the mobilely, if that's a word. The OpenSpot, as most people who have it know, has to be plugged into an Ethernet RJ45, and which typically what comes to mind is that it means you got to plug it into a router, where you're at. But there are adapters that are getting to be fairly well known that convert from the RJ45 to Wi-Fi. They contain a Wi-Fi chip, and you can use those in conjunction with your cell phone to be able to use the OpenSpot when you're mobile. So anyway, I don't know if that's worth discussing again. I think we talked about it a few weeks ago. Anyway, back to you, Mike.
Well, we did. So, and I'm pretty sure that in the shout box, that device, and either link to Amazon or otherwise, was posted. I'll have to take a quick peek to see if that's the case. So you want to bring it up, which means that some people hadn't either. Well, I'm not even sure what we're doing with it, but okay, there's a device that exists or a component. And are you suggesting that we discuss it further, or should we ask stations who have put their open spot in their cars using this Wi-Fi adapter of sorts to plug into the RJ45 jack? That's the only jack left open, I think, on the open spot, and to see how it works. Or are you suggesting that the manufacturer issue a recall for all devices immediately? K6KD, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking if there were people that may not have been, on the net when we had that discussion before, or maybe want to discuss it further. So I was just going to suggest putting it out there and seeing if there was any interest, and if there was not, then not discussing it. Back to you.
Well, fair enough. Who has interest in this? Please key up. All right, the dead air was due to a double. In fact, we had a double, and it removed an audio link briefly. So, and what I was going to say was that rather than calling for stations you want to hear, I should have just, called for stations, because now I don't know if you're just keying up to hear about it, or if you're keying up to not hear about it, or if you're going to key up and talk about it. So, let's see where we're at. I got Z01YHF and KT0QZR. Z01YHF, go ahead.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to, there's a device that I found interesting, and I'm not, I haven't followed this discussion. I actually just heard about the roundtable today when you came on the X Reflector. But there is a device made by TP-Link, and it's the TLMR3020. There's probably some other similar devices, but this has it's basically just a small router. It has one Ethernet port that you could plug into the open spot. And it can either get its internet from two places, so you can plug in a 3G, 4G USB modem into it. But the technology I thought that was actually pretty interesting for people that take their hotspots in and out of the vehicle is a technology called a WISP, WISP. So you can go into the router and you can program in the credentials for your home router. And then inside your open spot, I guess for the open spot, it's actually not an issue. This is actually probably more to do with my DVMega type setup that actually connects over Wi-Fi. But it would work for this router would work for the open spot. But I guess what I was going to say, if you're not using an open spot but you want to use this, then you can basically have your Raspberry Pi connect always to the same Wi-Fi address. It doesn't have, or SSID, so it doesn't have to switch between when you're at home or in the car. Anyway, but for the open spot in particular, it's just a nice, small, portable router. Over.
All right, appreciate that. KD0QZR, go ahead.
N6HKH Internet, KD0QZR, portable in Phoenix, Arizona. Mike, I've been kind of listening and kind of not, so catch me if I'm off base here, but I do run an open spot mobile in my 18-wheel semi. I am currently in a motel in Phoenix, and sitting here looking at the open spot, and it is connected via Ethernet cable to a TP-Link WR802N. It's a little Wi-Fi router. It's also known as the N300. It's got one little green dot on the top of it, so I'll put in a Pelican case. I take it in and out of the semi. In fact, I just flew back out to Phoenix tonight after being at home for a week. I took it home, set it on my shack bench there, linked it up to my computer, and within 2 minutes I was linked to my home internet via the quick setup method. And I've got it set up as a hotspot router. Currently it's getting its Wi-Fi off of my Verizon phone and sitting here next to me. And that is how I run D-Star every day of the week. The open spot's kind of self-explanatory. It speaks for itself. It's a stellar piece of equipment. In fact, I'm getting another one here before long. But just wanted to throw my little bit of 2 cents in there. That's a TP-Link WR802N. And it's got one little green light on. You can find it on Amazon for like $25. I got mine out here at Fry's here in Phoenix, Fry's Electronics. I love that store. But yeah, that's what I run mobile in the semi every day. And when I go home for my time off or whatever, I fly home over to Wichita, Kansas, and I take the little Go box with me and just link it up to the home internet as soon as I get home. Like I said, it takes less than 2 minutes. It's super easy, super fast. So with that, I'll throw it back to you if anybody's got any questions. I play with this thing just about daily. So KD0QZR, Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, Justin, thanks for that. And I think I recall we talked about the Open Spot. It's a trick device. I mean, you really can't go wrong if you want a multi-mode hotspot. And, as I mentioned, the downside was there wasn't anything much. There was not a USB port where you could take a Wi-Fi dongle and plug it in and then connect it to whatever. So our auxiliary device had to be devised, and the N300, especially the TP-Link, jogged my memory because it's been discussed several times here. But let me find out, John. I was trying to flip back through some of the posts in the shop box, and I'm not sure I have found when we posted that device that you're talking about. Is this the device the same as Z01YHF and KD0QZR have discussed, or is it a different one? K6KD, go ahead.
Well, it's a different one, but I think they're probably pretty much the same. This one is IO Gear, and the model is GWU637. It's more expensive. It's in the $40 price range. It's, I think, compared to the other one, I believe it's, if it's what I'm thinking of, it's quite a bit smaller. It's about the length of it's about 2 inches, about, like a lipstick case, I guess, something like that. So it's IO Gear, and that's available, on Amazon as well. Back to that.
All right. Well, I was trying to see if these devices for the Open Spot are posted as part of either a thread or a folder on the forum board, and I'm just having difficulty locating it right away. I think it's appropriate that we have that information available because, as you mentioned, John, stations come on the roundtable during the week and they hear that the Open Spot is being used in their car, and their jaws drop saying, "Oh, how the heck do you do that? Where do you plug it in?" And I don't see. There's no USB port here. There's no this, and so. And plus, with an RG45 jack, they expect an Ethernet cable. What do you want from me? And to find that you can take it mobile is important. Of course, the power supply mini USB port is well, that comes with the device on, I guess. So anyway, John, I think we ought to get this stuff posted, and hopefully somebody will do that for us, either in the shout box or find where we have it posted in the shout box. So with that, let's do this. Let's just find out if stations have found other ways of taking their open spot mobile and disconnected themselves from the Ethernet cable. We'll take you now. Please key up.
N6H8.
Nothing seen or heard. You know, in just flipping back through my notes, I have to tell you that I have just these two devices that I've discovered thus far, although we have quite a few references to OpenSpot. So, all right, we've taken care of that. John, thanks for the suggestion, and I appreciate the stations that have keyed up to offer their experiences. So we have question. Well, we will take your question of any nature, well, related to D-Star. You guys know the rules. Or a topic. Maybe there's something that has bugged you about D-Star and you'd like to have it explained or discussed. Let's do that now. Please key up.
WA6PX.
WA6PX, go ahead.
Roger, mentioning the OpenSpot reminded me, I'm wondering if anyone has insights about the Nano DV digital radio hotspot. Seems to compare a lot with the OpenSpot.
Fair enough. Nano DV. I don't think that I've heard that yet, but then, you know, my memory fades from moment to moment. Stations, what do you know about the Nano DV? Please key up. All right, no response. Well, I'm hoping that somebody's Googling that to see if it's out there. I was flipping through my date notes and didn't see anything about that, so you never know. People, manufacturers come up with new stuff all the time. And so, Jim, we'll just leave that open until someone can key up and say, here's what I know about the Nano DV. And it could be it's so new that, it hasn't made its way through enough stations to be able to have them reliably report on it, but I appreciate the question. Questions for the roundtable? Stations, please key up.
KD0.
KD0 QZR, go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, I'm just sitting here in front of my laptop and just Googled Nano Node DV Digital Radio Hotspot. You can find it on micro-node.com. I've looked at this site before. He's got stuff for digital voice modem designed for MMDVM, All-Star, Nano Node, IRLP, Echo Link, DV digital radio, and AE All-Star portable hotspot. The Nano Node DV is $495. Shoot, you could buy 2 open spots for that kind of money, but that's where you can find them, micro-node.com. 80QZR. Back to you there, Mike.
Well, I appreciate that. Micro-node.com. Well, for $495, it's got to have like an accessory jack that'll shine your shoes and perhaps have a little vacuum if you take it mobile. Holy mackerel. Well, yeah, I have, when the Raspberry Pis first came out, I saw some devices that at best can be described as um, dongles, pure and simple, and not very small, and with claims of all kinds of cool things they did, and they sold for a lot of money, and they never did beat that $18 USB plug-in Wi-Fi dongle that is most commonly used with the Raspberry Pi, but people bought them. Maybe they looked good. So, all right, the Nano Node DV. Has anyone bought one of these things? And I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. We know the price you paid for it, apparently. But that's beside the point. Why did you buy it, and what does it do? Help us out, please, Kia.
ZL1Y.
ZL1YHF, go ahead.
Okay, I did not buy one, but I did want to, just from looking at their documentation and their screens, or their pictures, you can tell it's running Raspbian, so I would say that it's a pretty good bet that it's a Raspberry Pi inside. It's certainly running Linux, and it has a little screen, so, they don't publish all the details, but just, using, I think, the max amount of logic, it looks probably something like I bet it would be actually more similar to the DV Mega Pi setup. Basically where you have a Raspberry Pi attached to a little hotspot modem, and it just has a screen so that it looks like you're able to control the device, locally without having to connect in from a different computer. So I know that one of the differentiating aspects of the OpenSpot is that all of the processing, everything is actually done inside an embedded system, usually, like a real-time embedded system instead of using, a general-purpose operating system like Linux. Over.
Well, thanks for helping us out with that description. I just pulled it up, and well, if it has a screen on it, I mean those screens, those monitors, they're not cheap, and perhaps that explains some of the cost. They have a lot of cool devices. I haven't run into this, and looking at the header up on top, they have the world's smallest plug-and-play everything. As far as digital goes, they cover the gamut from top to bottom. So let's spend a little bit more time with this. But, this is the first time anyone's mentioned this device or this company, let alone purchased one. Now, look, if you brought this thing up a year and a half ago or something, don't start yelling at me. I've forgotten. But there's been very little discussion. How cool. There's all kinds of trick devices out there. And OpenSpot, could be it could be run for its money, but OpenSpot, you can get that now at pretty much most every amateur radio vendor outlet, and the price is right. Looking at devices at or about the price of the OpenSpot, they pale in comparison, as so I've been told, and as I see it myself. Stations, please, Kia.
N6MU.
N6MUD, go ahead.
Yeah, looking at this micronode, the screen's a touch screen display, so there's a lot of power there. Obviously, you can do a bunch of connecting and disconnecting, but more importantly, you can actually configure your Wi-Fi on the fly. So if you go to a hotel, one of the biggest issues of a Pi is that how do you configure your Wi-Fi? It becomes an issue. With this device, you could probably just most likely, just like any phone or whatever, you could click on the Wi-Fi and type in your password, whatever, and you're rock and rolling. So I think this is pretty slick. And $400, whatever, is what it is, but maybe it'll come down in price. But I think it's pretty slick that someone actually came out with a device that's got a touch screen where it allows you to configure stuff and is basically self-sufficient, and it'll support itself without any type of external hardware required to configure it and what have you. Anyway, my 2 cents back to you, Mike, and 6 media.
Well, we appreciate the paper evaluation. And now that this has been mentioned and as people take interest in it, and I'm hoping that perhaps the URL will be posted on this shout box, since this would be new to the roundtable, that somebody will buy it, because there's always someone out there willing to buy one of everything, and we'll put it through its paces. And for those that want true plug and play and want to be able to configure everything right from the device on that screen, if it's a touch screen, as you've explained, Craig, that's not such a bad investment for the money. But you get a lot. It'll be fun to find out as that becomes more popular and stations get it. So very cool. Well, what else don't we know about that we can put to use on D-Star or open digital systems, please, Kia?
ZL2U.
ZL2UDF. Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you there, Mike. Not so much, it's more of a question than anything. You mentioned about sounds like a web page, a hot shot, somewhere, I'm not too sure. But, I'd be interested to hear what if you could say it slowly, what the URL is, if that's what you're referring to. Thanks.
Well, if you're talking about what we're just recently talking about, I mean, there's been some other devices that have been discussed. It's micro-node.com. And I'm still begging someone to post that URL in the shout box. You can even, if you want to be trick, provide a live link using the tools right above the text entry. Anyway, micro-node.com for the Nano Node DV on D-Star. Or the multimode one as well. That's what we've been talking about. So, what else don't we know about? What else have you taken a look at? What else are you thinking of spending your money on to operate on D-Star stations, please, Kia?
ZL2U.
ZL2UDF, go ahead.
My apologies, didn't phrase the question well enough. Thanks for the micronode.com URL. I was referring to your net. Do you have a URL for your net or for your area there that has sort of this information that you've been talking about?
Well, I'm sorry, I missed that. It must have gone right over my head. I get too many things in the fire when I run this net. It just in the address field of your browser, just type in around a table, all one word, .tech, TECH, around a table, all one word, .TECH.
Thank you.
ZL2.
No problem. All right, let's see. Anything else that we need to worry ourselves about on the D-Star equipment front? How to connect to D-Star to the reflectors. It seems like new stuff, new hotspots, multi-motor, single use are just flying through the air, and some vaporware, some not. How cool is that? What else should we be talking about? Stations, please, Kia. All right, nothing seen or heard. One of the things that we've been trying to find are stations that have put Buster version 1.1 to use, or 1.2 actually is where we're at now. And I've been, I was being bugged by stations that were having difficulty with Buster version 1.0, and there were some patches that were posted and workarounds, and They were frustrated that there were difficulties. Of course, I think the guys were in the P-list files, messing with them, and while some were successful, others created problems. Version 1.1 was posted not too long ago, primarily to work with the latest Mac operating system. And then 1.2 came out, and I thought that when I call for stations that have put this software to use, it's an Apple Store app, and you use the Thumb DV, speaking of Northwest Digital, and it's a great use for it, but I can't get anybody to report on it. And I don't know what the deal is. It just is upsetting to me, but I'm going to try one more time. Well, I'm going to try more than one time, but if you have Buster and a Thumb DV version 1.2 up and running, we'd like to hear from you. Not that it wouldn't be up and running, but a quick review. What do you think? Stations, please key up. Well, I'm surprised. You know, I think what I'll do is I got a couple of friends that, unfortunately, they're at work, of all things, when this net runs, and they've got Macs, and they had Buster running, and I'm going to have to set them down and say, hey, did you put them together? And if not, and if so, you know, tell me about it. And I'll get some stuff going here on that, because I'm excited about Buster. I think apparently I stand alone in that respect, which is not good. All right, I hear there was a double that I wasn't paying attention to, so me and Key. And let me call for stations that were trying to get into the round table, but either doubled and I miss you, or for whatever reason you think I'm ignoring you, which of course is not the case. But if you try to get in and couldn't, let's take you now. Please key up.
W6K.
Yeah, W6KD, Mr. Double. Go right ahead.
A little bit non sequitur, but it was too rich to not mention. I was looking at the manual for this Nano DV, and some of the text looked very familiar, and I went out. And anyway, they've lifted text out of the DV4 Mini manual and dropped it right into their manual. So they've plagiarized documentation from the DV4 Mini. So it has big question marks now in my head about what's going on with that device. You know, if you can't even write your own documentation, what, you know. Anyway, it says that X reflectors are the second generation of G-star reflectors and no longer widely in use. Interesting. I remember reading that somewhere before. However, in some countries like Italy, they are still used as the hams have not yet agreed to a uniform concept. Yeah, just about word for word over on the other side there. So, yeah, danger, Will Robinson.
Oh, really? Well, I wonder if this is going to be another one of these. Yeah, send it via PayPal as a gift, and I'll get you a shipping date later on, and then that's the end of the day. And, I have to tell you, any company that markets anything that allegedly works on D-Star, in which they bash D-Star or otherwise try to do a fake news, using that current phrase, to try to convince people that D-Star and the X reflectors are just fading away, which of course is, if anyone that spends any time checking that out would know that that is just absolutely false. That device is highly suspicious to me, and maybe that accounts for the reason why no one has one, at least none that have been apparent here. Well, Bob, appreciate your snooping. Buyer beware. I appreciate the posting of the URL by KE0NQE, but perhaps maybe we should add to that, be careful. Thanks a lot, Bob. All right, so stations, please key up. Oh, hang on.
VL1.
I have ZL1YHF and WS6PX. First is ZL1YHF. Go ahead.
Yes, I don't know if it raises the alarm bells or quells them a little bit, but if you look at the screenshots of that device as well, the Nano DV, it's actually running DV4 Mini Compact as the software like that they're showing on their screenshot. And if I'm looking at my Raspberry Pi here and looking at the outer dimensions, and it looks exactly like a you can tell by where the placement of the USB ports and the Ethernet port and the input ports. It's basically just a Pi inside. So, perhaps a less nefarious explanation is that, the main value added here is that they're just packaging something that you could easily do on your own by buying the DV4 Mini and, some other parts. But I don't know if that's the case without actually having some more details. But if they're ripping them off, then they're certainly ripping them off all the way around because they're using the same software. But one other thing I also wanted to add is a few overs ago I lost my train of thought when we were talking about the routers that go with OpenSpot. So I won't rehash too much. I just wanted to say that for those interested, that WISP protocol is actually interesting and relevant to the OpenSpots because it's basically what you can do is you can either get internet from it while you're on the road, or you can flip a switch, and if you're at home, you can get internet from your home Wi-Fi, so you're not using your mobile data at home. So anyway, that might be interesting, and I believe that the gentleman that talked about who was actually on that, it sounded like his device did the same thing, but the technology is WISP for anyone interested.
Got it, and I appreciate the clarification, and WISP has come up here from time to time. Thanks for bringing it up again. WA6PX, go ahead.
Roger, thanks. I was the one that brought this device up, and the reason I did was because I read the June QST review of the item just above it, the All-Star hotspot. And after I read the review, I decided to go to the manufacturer's website because the review was quite favorable in June. And that's when I spotted this thing. I know nothing about it, but whatever we can find out would be great. WA6PX, back to net control.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. We had a WA6PX either had a continuous key down, but we also, some of the reflectors wouldn't have known it because the audio link was dropped as a result. It's no big to do, but I couldn't talk while another station was transmitting, so. Well, isn't that interesting? So ARRL does a review of a highly suspicious device. Well, the device for a different mode. And so now that begs the question, is there one of these devices that works well and the others are ripoffs? Or will get pulled over ARRL's eyes because, these devices are just given to them, much like the cars and others that you see motor magazines. Well, not all of them are just given, but you know, they want you to review their devices, and so I wonder if this is pretty interesting stuff because companies that just rip off someone else and try to package what you can do on your own and then charge a lot of money for it, hoping you don't notice, that is not good. But then, you know, nobody said they bought one, so I hate to prejudge, but buyer beware in all matters. I don't care how fancy an ad, you know, they display or how much noise they make about it. But we'll see where this goes. So, let's just see. I want to make sure I got the board cleared. Anything further for this open segment of the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable, or anyone else key up and at least thought they did and couldn't get in, or any follow-up to things that you've heard thus far here on tonight's net? We'll take you now. Please key up. Right, nothing seen or heard. You know, amazingly, we've run through most of the topics that I had planned for tonight. A couple of stations that were going to carry the load on some of the topics I have bailed, and with an appropriate excuse. I mean, I got to tell you, there's this nasty stuff that's the cold of sorts floating around the West Coast that is just toppling workplaces and people, and you know, I'm just holding my breath, crossing my toes, knocking on wood, not stepping on cracks, just to hope I don't get it. So, at this point, I am going to directly ask, what do you want to talk about? Because I do not have any more topics that were pre-planned for tonight, and given that it's hot as hell here, I don't know that I want to shuffle through a bunch of papers and step away from the console to try to find something more to talk about. Instead, I'd rather hear what you guys would like to talk about. So what would you like to talk about? Tell me. Stations, please key up. ZL1YHF, go ahead.
Yes, I was just curious if anybody wants to talk about this, but as DX Simplex on D-Star, or on DV, I guess. I haven't, man, I just recently got a HF set up here, so I haven't done it. I understand the band conditions aren't great, at least for most forms of communication on HF, depending on the day and the location. But anyway, just curious about if there's some resources about finding contacts on HF or anything else that may be interesting. Over.
Yeah, D-Star on HF, we've talked about it. There's a big time net that is run on a regular basis and posts schedules that vary from season to season. And their sole purpose is to operate on HF. That is D-Star on HF, and they call out, well, I mean, most of you guys know about the group, and Net Control calls out the bands and gives the frequencies, and actually the frequencies I think are almost pre-designated. It's called the D-Star HF VoiceNet, and they have the 2017 schedule out. It's run by Kent, KQ4KK. He's been doing it for years, and they run through 75 meters up through 6, and at the end they check to see who's made contact with whom and how well it works and what equipment, that is antennas and other conditions, affect this transmission. And because we don't engage in that here, we haven't talked about it much, but Let me first ask, I assume that you got a ICOM 7100 or 9100. And number two, which I think are the only two radios that will operate on, well, the Flex 6000 with the ThunDB installed will certainly do it. I don't want to leave that one out. But have you been on that net? And secondly, do you have one of those radios? Z01YHF, go ahead.
Yes, I'm transmitting on a IC 7100, and you can probably tell by the call sign that I'm located in Auckland, New Zealand. So I don't know how far who I'm going to be able to reach from here, but I guess it depends a lot on the setup that I have. Right now, I just have an AH4, basically with the long wire antenna, but I haven't done much work at all on HF. And I have not heard of that net, so thank you for that information, and I'll see if I can at least hear them, if not actually make contact. Over.
Yeah, that really is the best way to test and participate in D-Star HF. It's not like there's you can spin the bands and just look for stations that are screaming on HF using D-Star, although I guess that's possible. But the net runs, let's see, it's D-Star HF voice schedule. The last is Saturdays at 2400 Zulu, 7 p.m. Eastern. That would be daylight standard times. Actually, there's got to be a newer schedule than this, because actually this looks like it might be winter HF, and I'm looking for the latest. Well, anyway, it's Saturday nights, 2400 Zulu, Sunday morning at 1500 Zulu, and then again Sunday evenings at 2400 Zulu. And let me find the reflector that they use. I just can't. I just want to make sure I have it right. It's reflector 030 Charlie. I don't know why I had a brain, on that. They've been on our reflector 030 Charlie, and you monitor that, and the net control calls out on that reflector the band and the frequency. Although the frequency and bands are posted, you can certainly get that. In fact, if you just Google food for International D-Star HF testing net, maybe even for net control at KQ4KK, you'll find the latest schedule. And but anyway, reflector 030 Charlie, Saturday evening, Sunday morning, and Sunday evening, and listen to him. You'll call it out. You give it a try, see what you can hear, and stations will report if they heard you, and that'll give you an idea as to whether it's going to work for you or not. And that's the best I can do. Anyone else wish to advise our Auckland, New Zealand friend about operating HF on D-Star? We'll take you now. Please key up. All right, no DV on HF aficionados with us right now. That net, and I've participated in it. I've got both a 7100 and a 9100, and I haven't been on it lately, but, the antenna has everything to do with it, and the height has a lot to do with it. I had some contacts from time to time, but I haven't had the same interest in that as others do. And I have to tell you, there are people that are fully committed to it, and there's a fair number of stations that participate, and whether you can make contact or not, at least you can hear what's up and who's being able to do what, and get some idea and feel for doing that. And so that's my recommendation. I was hoping maybe, and that's been running for a long time. Kent's been running it forever, and he does a great job. And even if you don't have much of a station to get on HF with DV, listening to that reflector at that time, or at those times and days, I should say, and it keeps It's not like there's just one, which is when I first got involved with it, there was just one net every week. It's interesting to hear who's heard who. So, all right, stations, please key up. All right, anything further to discuss? What is it that we haven't discussed? What is it that you're upset with me that I failed to discuss? What is it that you've heard thus far that is upsetting to you, that you just can't let it go? Or just generally, where are we missing the boat? If the boat's been missed, we'll take you now. Otherwise, we may bring tonight's roundtable to a close. I don't like that, but sometimes my hands are tied. Stations, please key up. Well, I'll make it one last call just because we've been running now for 2.5 hours, short of what would otherwise be 3. But this is a holiday period, at least in North America. There are a lot of people that are out and about. If you're in the Southwest part of the U.S., which includes me, you know that it's just been ridiculously hot and going to get hotter. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm a t-shirt and shorts kind of guy with flops. I don't trust air that's cooler than about 85 degrees. But, 105 or higher is just a bit too much. Usually 90s, maybe 100 is, that's no big deal. I don't even turn the air conditioner on, but when it gets above 100, holy mackerel. So maybe that's taking people out. I don't know. Could be that, and just looking down here at some of the tweets and other things that are coming across generally, and a lot of fires starting up. It's just going to be miserable and it's going to get worse. But that doesn't mean much. So, this is my long-winded way of saying, unless you speak up and you have something for the roundtable, we may have to bring it to an end. So, stations, please key up now. Well, not seeing anything or hearing anything further, I think we'll conclude tonight's edition of the Thursday Night D-Star Roundtable. I want to thank every station that participated, because without your participation, there would be no roundtable. We're here every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific to 0200 Zulu on the constellation of X reflectors. Feel free to come on over and hang out, especially if your local repeater or reflector is just not keeping you occupied, and come on over and see who's hanging around here. Usually there's someone around, and, there's no strings attached. We don't have a rules board posted. You'll look at the Roundtable Forum board, and there is absolutely nothing there that says whatever you do, don't talk this, or be careful about that. See, we don't operate that way. So feel free to come on over and check it out. Now, the shout box will be cleaned up shortly after the net concludes, with this contents put in the shout box history. That means, though, that the shout box will be clean and ready to go. It's open 24/7 on the Roundtable Forum board for you to post and talk about things if you like. You can certainly leave suggestions for me, topics you'd like to have discussed. If you're listening to this as a podcast or otherwise later on by recording, and there's something that you think is important for all of us to see, put it in the shout box. Of course, you can always come over to the Constellation and talk it up as well. I would, though, if you have an ongoing topic that perhaps you'd like to start or continue on, you might want to move up to the current discussions section of the board. There's a folder there where your posts will not be lost, because ultimately on the shout box, those posters roll off the screen. It's not really intended as a ongoing discussion board. It's a chat room, really, but it's there for you to use, and we appreciate those that do use that to communicate to us and to others. So, the recording on the podcast will be up by noon tomorrow. Tomorrow being Friday for at least me here. But it's probably going to be up much sooner, as Ming does a pretty good job in getting it down sooner. I can't think of one more thing to say. I'm going to take a break, head down the hallway, come back here in a bit. But I do appreciate all the stations that keyed up, the new ones and the ongoing ones. And at any time, I'll take your suggestions for topics, things that you'd like to have discussed, especially if you're listening to this as on a recording. Send me an email. I don't care, n6hkh@me.com, or post it on the shout box. Let us know, and we'll be glad to work it up for you. So, everyone, I hope your week is great. This weekend, stay cool, enjoy it, be safe, be on D-Star. And with that, everyone, have a great rest of the night or morning and weekend. N6HKH. Good night.
Yeah, good job, Mike, as usual. Looking informal with W6KD. W6KD, you still on? This is KF0LF calling, over.
Hey, Denny, hey, did you see the note I put up on the shout box there?
Negative. I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff here, just carrying my radio around. I didn't look at the computer. I was going to ask you if you were going to the Mega Fest on